Hello and welcome to another edition of What Does the Giraffe Say Media with me, Kathleen Ritorne. We're an organisation that aims to connect people in conservation by holding live interviews on social media. Today, I'm very happy to be joined by Amanda, and she is a ranger in Australia, as well as she's going to be embarking on an epic adventure, which we're going to be talking about very shortly. Before we get into that, Amanda, can I ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in conservation?
Absolutely. Good morning from the other side of the world. So as Kathleen said, my name's Amanda Dudgeon. I'm a ranger here in Australia, specifically on the east coast of Australia. So a bit of a long route to conservation, you could say. Out of high school, I became a chef originally and worked in fine dining restaurants. Ended up at the University of Gastronomic Science in Italy, which is essentially the University of Slow Food. And whilst I was there, I ran a workshop for the Commission for Sustainable Development for the Youth and Women's Group. And there was some amazing youth from around the world that we were hosting. And I was really inspired by what they were wanting to do for home. And I thought, well, you know what, sustainability starts at home, just as charity does. So who are we to tell anyone about managing natural resources or the environment when we need to get ourselves sorted first? So I went home to study natural resource management. And during that degree up in Queensland, I did a course where it was a really challenging course. I mean, visited national parks for almost a month and then did an exam at the end of it. So it was tough. And we met an amazing ranger at Early Beach who was really inspiring for the entire group and sort of planted that seed of you can really make a difference as a ranger. And then came across the graduate ranger program in South Australia and applied when I finished my honours thesis. And as I say, the rest is history.
And that was great what you were just saying then, that it was a woman ranger that kind of inspired you. Is that typical in Australia that you get male and female rangers, or is this something that's kind of becoming a bit more popular?
I think it's sort of in line with a lot more women in university. You'll notice that conservation degrees or things in environmental management or that sort of area will be sort of 80, even 90% female students. So we're almost sort of taking over the industry in a way gradually, which is kind of great. So it definitely changes based on where you are, and regionality and remoteness does impact that, as does, I suppose, for some women who choose to, they struggle to balance that families with the sort of work that we do, if it's particularly remote or in parts of Australia where you do have to be away from your family for periods of time. But yeah, I mean, I've been very lucky in that one of the first places I had my full-time ranger gig, we were mostly women. Certainly all the bosses were, which was lovely. So I do enjoy having a female executive. It certainly changes things a little bit. So yeah.
And we're coming up to World Ranger Day. I mean, it's been World Ranger Month throughout all of July. And on the 31st of July, it's going to be World Ranger Day. And throughout the entire month, that we've been very lucky that we've been having lots of people on the show talking about their different roles in conservation, but with a focus on rangers throughout this period. Now, for you as a ranger in Australia, what typically is it that you do? What's the role you do? What are the issues, and how do you combat that?
Yeah, it's a really good question in Australia. In that, obviously, as in most places, it does change based on where you are, because we have such different ecosystems and environments, because it's obviously such a pretty big country. Everything from desert in Central Australia to, you know, the remote coastlines, to rainforests, which I currently manage. And I managed basically all of those before. So I think the consistent thing, probably one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with, which makes sense, is ultimately all contributed to by climate change. So the being an island, not being very high, our coasts are quite heavily impacted by climate change, rising sea levels, temperature change, and certainly extreme weather events have played a big part in what we do in particularly the last 5 years. And can really dominate your work, because you're sort of essentially recovering and reconstructing and trying to assist the wildlife flora and particularly the facilities to recover. But I think in Australia and also New Zealand, one of the unique things is how the huge part of our job, which is pest, plant and animal work, because both locations that were isolated for so long geographically, that ecologically they're amazingly unique with huge levels of endemism, and they're amazingly delicate little petals, our species. So anything that comes in ends up taking over. So biosecurity and managing our pests, plants and animals is just a huge part of our job, and is contributed greatly to by climate change, because again, a lot of our species are very sensitive. There's not a lot of movement they can make geographically and still sustain and persist. So the impacts of those best species and that sort of extra stress on them can be really challenging, and particularly when you're close to urban areas, the level of, I suppose, garden weeds that enter our parks can be a bit disheartening. Yeah, it's something that's a particularly big issue down here in the south.
And I guess as well, kind of you touching a little bit there on the climate change, Australia has been in the news quite globally as well due to a lot of extreme weather events and things like that. Is that a big issue that you have to face as well?
Certainly, yeah. Most of my parks have been closed since 2020 because of one major weather event we had then, let alone the flooding we had earlier this year, where we've pretty much been in assessment and recovery mode since the start of March. Also because some of us were impacted by the floods personally too, so sort of trying to get back into work after a somewhat change in living conditions. So you had ongoing rain as well, and it's really big shifts. So we went from a huge drought leading into the summer of 2019 and 2020 for us, a horrific fire season, and then just 6 months later the start of a really big wet. So it's sort of that almost extreme weather fatigue for a lot of our park staff, where we sort of went from seeing species starting to struggle and sort of drop off from drought to suddenly the opposite, where weeds have taken over, and our parks, you can't even get to half of them because it's pretty much a mud puddle. So it's certainly interesting and a dynamic job at the moment.
I'm sure. And are there any species in particular that are being impacted by that? And what are your kind of work to try and to deal with the fact that their environments are changing?
Yeah, I think one of the big things, and certainly one of the focuses that I had actually for my honours thesis, was about looking at that landscape ecology scale. So for us, it's really looking at across all of our reserves in a region and going, okay, where will species be able to persist into the future, not necessarily where are they now. So when managing our parks, you really have to think bigger picture and longer term and go, okay, so where is sort of our best patch? How can we maintain that as close to pristine as possible and improve or increase that area of high quality habitat for everything, so that as species need to move across the landscape and adapt to those extreme weather events and warming climate or drying climate, depending on where you are in Australia, there's somewhere for them to be able to go. So there has been a lot of an increase in translocation of our fauna species where that is possible, and introduction of flora where it's possible as well, and looking at fencing some areas to exclude pest animals to sort of kick-start some of that translocation. So it's an interesting space at the moment because not everyone is in that headspace or has been in sort of, I suppose, the older, more traditional style of ecology where everything sort of has its little spot and needs to stay there. So it's, sort of bringing everyone along with that idea of thinking big picture and landscape wide.
And I know normally when people think of wildlife rangers, they might get an image of guys and girls in combat gear with rifles and poaching and that kind of stuff. Does any of that happen in Australia, or is it a slightly different setup there?
It's a different setup. We're very lucky that in largely we don't have that sort of readily military style impact, and we don't need to carry guns at work. We simply use them for pest animal management. For us, we do have some wildlife trade, and that's in sort of our reptiles and those sorts of animals that are quite sought after overseas. Again, we have very unique fauna, but it's very much easier to control when you're an island. So for us, a lot of that's actually done by other agencies in the biosecurity space, so both coming in and going out of Australia. For us, it's actually more to do with flora and crimes such as deforestation, impacts of neighbours encroaching on park, and also, unfortunately, the growing of less than ideal crops, particularly in my parks, actually. So I suppose the safety side of it from a compliance perspective or a legal activity, relates to things like marijuana crops or illegal camps or four-wheel drive and trailback activity, which is a very popular pastime in Australia, given the big landscape we have. And unfortunately, forestry reserves aren't apparently big enough, so they sort of do encroach into national parks. But we're very lucky that, for us, often the safety side of it is more to do with actually wildfire response and the natural landscape in which we work, such as insects and animals that probably pose a greater threat. So, yeah, it's a wonderful New South Wales vehicles. We do covered our Land Cruisers. They are beasts that sort of go anywhere, and then you get back in your little Toyota Corolla and wish you were in one of those again.
You kind of touched on it a little bit earlier just now, actually, and I do find it quite interesting how each kind of different country and region have their different issues. But I think from my perspective, coming from a view from England, for example, I always feel like Australia seems to be quite strict with its rules in what can be imported and kind of certainly what can be exported. Does the government and the law enforcement then therefore take like these kind of things very seriously there?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a huge thing in Australia. Even going from one region of Australia to another, they literally stop your car and it's searched. For if you have, that rogue banana hidden somewhere that could end the world. With fruit fly, it's particularly obviously the imports for the government is around obviously agriculture and the economic side of it, but the benefit being that what impacts our agricultural crops often also impacts our native species. So we do get those benefits as well. So really big things for us. Obviously, cane toads was a complete failure and greatly impacts our native species, ongoing legacy of that one. But at the moment, fire ants is a really big fear. And there's a few other things. Obviously, we've had might just impact our bees as well. But biosecurity, we're very lucky. They're certainly on top of it. And all Australians grow up being very aware of biosecurity, no matter where you live, as well as things like the risks of bushfires and what to do in storms and that sort of thing. It's sort of a part of day-to-day life, as everyone knows, to when you come back from overseas, don't bring anything if you can, because you're probably going to end up with your bag searched and spending hours trying to escape from the airport. So, we do. And particularly at the moment, we've got a big threat of foot and mouth disease coming across, which in many ways from Indonesia is more a matter of when rather than if. So there's certainly a lot of fear in our beef industry at the moment, and understandably so. Biosecurity is one of the number one issues for Australia and the government.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess, as you say, because it is such a small island, none of your flora and fauna has built up a resistance to any of the things that are coming through. So it can have a devastating impact on the wildlife and your wild spaces. We're going to switch a little bit from Australia, and we're going to start talking a little bit now about your latest escapade, which I think is completely bonkers, but also absolutely incredible. So you're about to embark on walking the Thin Green Line. For those who don't know, can you explain what the Thin Green Line is? And then we'll go a bit deeper into what your walk entails.
Sure. So walking the Thin Green Line is, as you said, a bonkers or mad idea, as Kate Leeming likes to put, that it's making a difference. I like to call it mad. So it's a trip where I'll be an expedition. Essentially, I'm traveling around Oceania, so Australia, New Zealand, and the small Pacific Island nations as well, interviewing rangers, filming them telling their stories on park, and making a documentary at the end to raise awareness for what we do, to tell people who we are and what on earth we do, because no one ever knows. I was like, oh, you're a ranger, what do you do? And also I'll be, the walking side of things is I'll be hiking 1 kilometre for every ranger on the International Ranger Federation's honour roll for the 2023 World Ranger Day. So the trip kicks off this Sunday on World Ranger Day, July 31. And by the time I hit World Ranger Day next year, we'll have over 1,500 rangers on that honour roll, which is rangers who have been killed in the line of duty since we started recording them in 2009. So it was a way of bringing that sort of real and tangible concept to those numbers and what they mean, that they're a life, and to honour the sacrifice of those rangers around the world. So it is a bit crazy. I'll be sharing it on social media. And as a ranger, that is not my bread and butter. I'm generally allergic to social media, but I have to learn to be savvy and comfortable with it. And I'm not a filmmaker by any stretch of the imagination, so learning that as I go as well. But I thought who better to put us on the map as a region and say who we are, and show my amazing colleagues who are absolutely inspiring, than a ranger as well. So that's the trip.
And I mean, it's an absolutely incredible trip, and it's going to be it's not going to be an easy one at that. And you've set yourself quite a deadline with the journey, considering the distance that you're traveling. What do you think are going to be some of your biggest challenges, and have you got any prep to kind of combat that?
Yeah, well, I hope it's not too challenging that I've already gone through with the floods and suddenly being less 80% of my belongings and my rental. Probably the biggest impacts really have actually already happened in a way, in having to sort of reset the thinking, and a lot of the non-direct impacts of the floods was the sponsorship pulled out for my car, so I had to suddenly buy my own car. So I'm now going to be even poorer and not have a penny to my name at the end of it. So I suppose some of the more interesting on-trip challenges will be with the filming side of things, managing footage, and how on earth to do that from the middle of nowhere when I've run out of space on hard drives. And particularly the sailing side of things, because that will be the Pacific Islands, so Tonga, Fiji, Samoa, Solomon Islands, and Papua New Guinea, because I've never sailed in my life. So I'll be took a leaf out of Greta Thunberg's book, and we'll be getting a lift, hopefully, from some lovely people from Auckland. So putting it out there, anyone who's bored, June and May next year, but love a lift. So that will be it'll be amazing to be on the open ocean, but I also do get motion sickness, so it will be extremely entertaining for others. I have looked into some potential medication that will help with that. You have a great one in the UK I have had sent to me. So, that will actually, I suppose, in some ways be the most physically challenging in being able to sort of focus and stay the course with that. But I thought it was really important to do a sailing aspect to show how isolated we really are as islands in this part of the world, and that a huge part of our natural resource management really is the marine environment. And to highlight that is how better to do that than sail long distances between islands, to say that this is who we are as a region.
Yeah, and I think what you just touched on there with the marine side of things is a great point as well. And often people kind of get fixated on being on the terrestrial side of things when it comes to rangers, but obviously our oceans are hugely important, and they need to be monitored and regulated as well, and need to have that people looking on them. So you mentioned you're going to be talking to the rangers along the way. So are you then going to be sharing their stories and the challenges they face? What's your hope? What's your end hope for this?
I suppose twofold. Firstly, a more, I suppose, selfish way for the Rangers is to show all of us, because we are often spread out across the region and all the nations themselves are quite isolated, is to show that this is who we are, guys. You know, these are your colleagues. So let's connect, let's network better. Let's not try to reinvent the wheel. We're all one team. We're all big one Ranger family. And I think we can learn a lot from that and greatly improve outcomes in what we do by not sort of relying on our agencies or our employers to try and sort of connect those dots. It's like, let's do this ourselves. And what better time to do it than just before our very first Oceania, our regional ranger forum in New Zealand, which is very exciting. It's coming up in October this year. So I'm really looking forward to seeing rangers sort of connect with what they do on a bigger scale and see that they're supported and appreciated, and there's others doing the same job. And then the other side of it is obviously the benefit of the public knowing who on earth we are and what we do, and seeing that it's a very rewarding job, but it's not all hugging trees and koalas, and that there are challenging aspects to it, and that it's not always fun, and it can be very dangerous at times, and that everyone does it for the love of the job. So, what can people do to help? What is it that people do day to day that can negatively impact what we do, and the importance of our roles for combating climate change and really for the future of humans as well as the natural environment.
And I think kind of feeding off from that quite nicely as well is, yes, there's when it comes to climate change and the impacts of conservation, it can be incredibly overwhelming, and some people can be like, okay, I can't make a difference, I'm not going to do anything, or it's too late. Or, the negative mindset can almost stop progress from happening. What do you do to remain positive, and what would you suggest for others who are thinking, okay, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed? How can they keep going?
That's a really good question, because it is something that our rangers face every day. I mean, one of the rangers in my office, he's an absolute legend. He's been a ranger since 1977. He's the longest serving, still working in our state. And I think a few months ago, he went to a meeting about impacts of climate change and some of the threatened species he's worked on for over 30 years. And he was like just absolutely heartbroken in some ways, seeing that the potential reality is that over 30 years of work is almost out the window. And that's something that you do have to kind of learn to think about and live with. But ultimately, it's those big picture things, and going out in our parks makes a big difference. Like, if you're having a really tough day at work or things just don't seem to be going well, you're sort of like, oh, let's just go back out on park and pull some weeds. Let's go and check a trail. And you're just like, oh, see, this is why we're doing it. This is why we're here. It's okay. And also within our teams, morning tea and cake can make a big difference for rangers as well. But ultimately, actually being in nature can really help reset your head and go, even the smallest win is still a great one. Even just having one person connect, or that light bulb moment go on for just one child in a park, or one person, means that for the rest of their lives, every single decision they make will be influenced just that little bit by that knowledge they have, by that connection and awareness they have of the environment now. So it's just coming back to that, and being pretty much in nature makes a big difference for me.
And I think what you just said there is key as well, is focusing on the fact that just every now and then just remembering the little changes that you've made, and know that it can make a difference. And by having conversations, you can inspire other people. And it's important to try and do it in a way where you don't put people off, but you make sure that people are kind of driven to try and make a difference. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing. If people are watching what you're doing as well, and they're wanting to be able to support you, what would you say would be the best way to go about doing that?
Sure. So obviously the big one is jumping on the donations page for the trip, and donating to what will be the Oceania Fund within the Thin Green Line Foundation, because that will support ranger to ranger initiatives in the region, where we can support our colleagues in those small island nations and our First Nations Indigenous rangers get opportunities for training to attend the World Ranger Congress and these regional gatherings, as well as access information and training from another peer, which is a very different experience, and can be really important for welfare and continuing on the job.
And I think as well, what you've just mentioned there about it being inclusive as well for people. I mean, the theme is diversity this year, and I think it's a great way to try and connect everyone from all the different regions. You mentioned just then as well that you're working alongside the Thin Green Line Foundation as well as International Rainer Federation. Was there a particular reason why you decided to work with these guys?
Absolutely. I was on the committee for the South Australian Ranger Association when I pretty much first started as a ranger. Most of the committee members were in the office I worked in, which was handy. And I had the privilege of meeting Sean Wilmore, the founder, very early on in the piece, working at Womadelaide Adelaide at the stand for the Thin Green Line Foundation, and loved being able to contribute to that bigger global Ranger family, and that concept of the broader Ranger family really was a huge motivator for me in being a Ranger. Another one of those things I come back to when it's a bit of a tough day at work. So having something that contributed to the foundation when I felt like I wasn't able to do that at the moment in my new state was really the main motivator, because it's amazing the work that they do around the world, and how much they support Rangers and their families, and the difference that the training they provide makes. And with obviously the International Ranger Federation raising awareness within our own ranks of Rangers of, this is our representative body, this is our organisation who can represent us and make a difference for us in the world. And for everyone to find out who their local association is, I think is really important, because if you're in an area where you live quite remotely, having that connection can really help you connect with other Rangers and network. And again, there's really great welfare outcomes. So working with the Thin Green Line Foundation, particularly being a large Australian-based in Melbourne, is really great, because they're local mob. So yeah, couldn't be more honoured or privileged to work with them.
Yeah, they do some absolutely incredible work. So I completely agree. We've got a comment coming through from Winnie. Hi, Winnie. Always lovely to see her. She's a regular of the show. And she's saying a very compassionate challenge you're about to take on. This is absolutely wonderful. What do you think your highlight of the journey is going to be, given a choice?
Oh, it's a big question. There's so many. I'm so looking forward to heaps of it. One of the first ones is actually the first week I will be on Lord Howe Island, which is a really, really amazing location. It's very much sort of out of this world, sort of Jurassic Park style amazingness, and meeting and seeing what Rangers do in New Zealand and other countries. I think that will be a massive highlight for me. Even just speaking to some of the Rangers initially to sort of a bit of logistics, like, wow, you do what? And what's your role? Oh, that's fascinating. We sort of end up getting caught up for almost hours chatting away, and we're like, oh, we meant to do that at the time. Like, we should actually get back to work. So it's just, hearing what other Rangers do will be, I think, a highlight in and of itself, even though it's sort of a big thing. Yeah, I just cannot wait to visit New Zealand and see Lord Howe Island and those amazing landscapes.
And it's going to be quite tough physically. I mean, I know you mentioned earlier about the sailing side, which, as you said, is going to be a bit bumpy for you in every way. Have you been training physically, and how are you going to deal with the different climates and terrains?
Especially I'll be racing the wet season to get around the top of Australia. Well, I've got a few things in place in terms of which camping kit I'm bringing with me to help me deal with the heat and the sun, because I'll sensibly be chasing the sun after I get to about a third of the way up Australia. So that will certainly be a challenge. And physically, for the hiking side of things, I had been plans of mice and men, planning to do a lot of training, and then got sick a couple of times, and the logistics of the trip have really had me sort of chained to my laptop, unfortunately, for quite a while. But it's nothing like training on the trip. So it's sort of spreading it out. I've got the magnesium tablets and the foam roller to help me through, bringing the yoga mat to do some stretching. But a lot of it will just be, I suppose, managing my health, just generally being smart about eating, sleeping, all the sort of things that you do at work when you're out on a field trip, or you're doing sort of fire response, managing fatigue, that sort of thing. But in terms of heat and safety, all of my clothes are being treated with insect repellent, because obviously we've got some rather nasty bugs here in Australia, and making sure I can keep cool in the heat and humidity. It will be pretty oppressive by the time I get around to Broome in Australia, because it'll be the build up to the wet season. Just I suppose being smart about what I wear and my camping equipment more than anything else.
I cannot wait to be following your journey. Okay, I've only got one more question left, Amanda. We've had some lovely feedback as we've been talking, lots of very impressed people cheering you on. If you have a comment that you'd like to put to Amanda, please pop it in the comment section, and I will do exactly that for you. If you're watching this and it's not live, but you still have a question that you'd like to ask, again, please do so, and I will help to get a response for you as well. If you're liking the show, please do give it a like, comment, or share. the more people that see it, the more awareness we can raise for the incredible work that's being done by rangers all over the world. So my question for you, Amanda, is going to be, what are your hopes for the future after this?
I have no idea. No. Someone was asking what I'm planning to do at work when I get back, and I said I'm going to be a very different person at the end of the trip, so I don't know. Hopes for the future ultimately is actually to have a region of rangers wonderfully connected, to make fantastic friends, and to see really positive outcomes for all of us in the region, in managing our protected areas. I love my job. I think it's the best job in the world. So I've always been someone who, I suppose, sees the glass as half full. So even though all the things that we face can be very challenging, there's always, hope at the end of it. There's always positives that'll happen in your park, and great things you'll get to do. So for me, it's really about meeting amazing people and knowing that we'll all be a bit better connected and a bit more aware, and the public will be a little bit kinder and perhaps make slightly better decisions. So I suppose lots of hope for the future, but nothing too specific, because that's a very big 12 months ahead of me.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, and as you say, I think you will be a different person by the end of it, because I think a trip like that is going to change you forever, and I think it's going to be absolutely incredible. As I say, we've had some wonderful comments. Everyone's wishing you the best and cheering you on. We've had people commenting from Europe, America, Africa, Israel, so lots of different areas around the world. So you've definitely got their support. I'm sure when Australia wakes up, they'll be cheering you on as well. Thank you for getting up so early for you to come on and talk with us and share your story. Is there anything that you would like to say before we say goodbye?
No, not specifically. I suppose for the rangers out there, keep up the good work. You're absolute legends. Love what you do. And yeah, if you're not a ranger, but you do visit national parks or reserves, then say good day when you do see staff members, and thank them for what they do, because they do a pretty awesome job. And yeah, just think about every little thing you do each day and what that contribution that might make to improving things for our threatened species and our natural and wild spaces.
And we've just had a comment coming through from Brian Onidala, and I think it's a good point, actually, saying he would love a replica of the same here in Africa. So who knows, we could see other people all around the different continents and around the world taking up similar challenges, and hope raising awareness for that as well.
That would be fantastic. I would love that to happen, and have different regions just pick up that gauntlet each year. I think that would be amazing. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you for raising awareness for rangers. I know they do an incredible job, and you do as well, and all around the world. All of them are very different challenges that they face in different scenarios. It can be quite an isolated career, so just knowing that they've got this support behind them and people are cheering them on and trying to make it better for them is going to make life a lot nicer for them. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Amanda, for coming on, and enjoy the rest of your day.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.